The monitor flatlined at 2:47 in the morning. The sound it made was not dramatic. It was a single, continuous tone, flat and indifferent, and it was the sound of a room full of trained professionals running out of answers. Dr. Daniel Voss stepped back from the table. He was 48 years old. 16 years of thoracic surgery. 312 procedures. A reputation that had been built carefully and deliberately and that had never, until this moment, encountered a situation it could not manage. He stepped back. He looked at his hands. He looked at the monitor. Time of death, he said. 2:47. The room absorbed it. The way rooms absorb these things, not all at once, but in stages, each person processing the surrender at their own speed. The scrub nurse at the instrument table did not move. Her name badge said Claire Mercer. 29 years old. Agency hire. 6 months at Mercy General. She took the worst shifts, the overnight rotations that the senior nurses traded away like unwanted currency. She was quiet in the particular way that some people are quiet, not because they have nothing to say, but because they have learned, somewhere along the way, that saying it costs more than it returns. Nobody in that or knew anything about her beyond what her file said. Her file said very little. Step back from the field, nurse. Voss stripped his gloves. It's over. Claire looked at the monitor. She looked at the man on the table. William Harford, 43 years old, father of 3, admitted at 2:17 with a posterior aortic tear that had been bleeding for 30 minutes before they got him open. She looked at the instrument tray. She picked up a steel clamp. Excuse me. Voss turned. His voice had the particular edge of a man who has just failed at something and needs the room to follow his lead into the acceptance of that failure. I said step back. He has 30 seconds of cerebral perfusion remaining, Claire said. Her voice was different. Not louder. Not aggressive. Simply different. The quality of it made Dr. Rachel Mitchell, the anesthesiologist, look up from her monitors for the first time in 4 minutes. You are a scrub nurse, Voss said. I know what I am. Claire moved to the head of the table. Mitchell pushed 4 units own egg on the rapid infuser. Give me a milligram of AP. Mitchell did not move. She looked at Voss. Don't look at him, Claire said. Quietly. Not unkindly. Look at the monitor. His pressure is 18 over palpable. You have one decision to make and you have about 15 seconds to make it. Mitchell looked at the monitor. She pushed the AP. Voss grabbed Claire's arm. You do not take over my operating room. What happened next took less than 2 seconds. Claire dropped her elbow, redirected his grip, and moved him efficiently, without anger, without performance, 2 steps to the left. He didn't fall. But he was no longer between her and the table. He stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened. People who have been physically redirected by someone smaller than them require a moment. The body understands something the mind takes longer to accept. Before we go any further, I want to know who's watching right now. Drop your city or your country in the comments. Just that. Nothing else needed. People find code whisperers from places I never expected, and every time I read those comments I remember exactly why we tell these stories. If you're not subscribed yet, do it now, quietly, while this story is just getting started. Because where this one goes, you'll want to have been here from the beginning. Claire plunged both hands into the chest cavity. No instrument. No suction. Her gloved fingers navigating the dark, warm interior of a man's chest by feel alone, moving past shattered rib, past lung, beneath esophagus, following the heat and pressure of blood moving in the wrong direction. Close your eyes, she told herself. Not aloud. Internally. The instruction of someone who has done this before in conditions that made this or feel like a controlled environment. She found the tear. Posterior. Massive. The aorta shredded at the back wall, bleeding with the force of a vessel that has been under systemic pressure for 40 minutes with nothing slowing it down. She pressed her left thumb directly over it. The bleeding stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. Suction. Her voice was the same quiet, exact, moving at a frequency that bypassed the panic in the room and reached something more fundamental. Clear the field. I need to see what I'm working with. The circulating nurse Harper, 24 years old, 8 months out of nursing school, pressed the suction into the cavity with shaking hands. The machine gurgled. The blood cleared. What the room saw was Claire Mercer's left hand buried to the wrist in a man's chest, her thumb against his spine, holding his life in place by force of grip alone. Mitchell was crying. She didn't know when she had started. Pressure is rebounding, Mitchell said, her voice stripped of everything except the fact. 60/40. 70. He's perfusing. Voss had not moved from the spot where Claire had redirected him. He was watching her hands. His face had the particular expression of a man who has encountered something his existing framework cannot categorize. You can't hold that indefinitely, he said. His voice had changed again, the authority gone, replaced by something that was almost, but not quite, a question. The tear is too large for primary repair. You'd need a synthetic graft, and you can't place a graft while your hand is occluding the vessel. You're just. Bovine pericardial patch, Claire said. 40 proline on a curved needle. Harper opened the patch kit. Mitchell, drop his systolic to 60 so I don't blow the repair when I sew. Harper looked at Voss. Don't look at him, Claire said again. Still not unkind. He stepped away from the table. I didn't. Harper opened the patch kit. Mitchell dropped the pressure. Voss said nothing. People who know they have stepped away from something do not argue with the person who stepped toward it. There is a particular silence that follows the recognition of that fact. Voss was in it. What happened over the next 14 minutes was something that Dr. Rachel Mitchell would spend the rest of her career attempting to describe accurately, and concluding, each time, that the language available to her was insufficient. Claire Mercer performed a posterior aortic patch repair. One-handed. By feel. Her left thumb maintaining occlusion against the thoracic spine while her right hand drove a needle through synthetic patch material and torn aortic tissue in a space she could not see directly, guided entirely by the information her fingers were sending her. The suture line she threw was not improvised. It was not approximate. It was the specific, mechanical pattern of someone who had developed this technique through repetition in conditions where imprecision was not an option. Stitch. Pull. Lock. Stitch. Pull. Lock. The knots were tied one-handed, slid into position by index finger, tightened against the pounding resistance of a heart that was, against considerable odds, still beating. When she released her left thumb from the spine, every person in that room held their breath. The patch held. The chest cavity, which had contained enough blood to constitute a threat to every downstream organ, remained dry. Pressure is 110/70, Mitchell said. Her voice had the quality of someone reporting something they are still deciding whether to believe. That's a normal sinus rhythm. He's completely stable. Voss moved to the table. He looked at the suture line. He leaned in. He adjusted his loops. He traced the repair with his eyes the way a person traces something they need to understand before they can accept it. The spacing was millimeter perfect. The knots were a specific interlocking pattern, not standard surgical technique. Something else. Something that carried the signature of a methodology developed in a context very different from a Chicago or at 3 in the morning. He had seen this once before. He couldn't locate when. The memory was there in the specific shape of those knots, but the context around it was missing. Who taught you that? Voss said. Claire stripped her gloves. The wet slap of latex on biohazard bin was the only sound in the room. Wash out the cavity and close him up, Dr. Voss, she said, reverting instantly, completely to the soft, unremarkable tone of a junior scrub nurse on the overnight shift. "I'm not feeling well. I need to take my break." She pushed through the OR doors. The room watched her go. Nobody spoke. People who witness something that exceeds their existing categories for excellence require time before language becomes available to them. The OR was full of people in that process, standing at their stations, looking at a suture line that should not exist, in a man who should not be alive. Voss stood at the table for a long time. He looked at the repair. He looked at the door. If this is sitting heavy right now, drop a comment and say, "I'm still here. I want to see who's with me at this point in the story. And while you're down there, tell me, what do you think Claire is really hiding?" That's what we do here at Code Whisperers. We find the people nobody looked at closely enough. And sometimes, you see them before the story gets there. Dr. Harrison Croft arrived at 3:14. He came through the OR doors still wearing his coat over his scrubs, the coat of a man who had been called from somewhere that wasn't the hospital and had not taken the time to change because the call had not left room for that kind of consideration. He was the chief of surgery. 22 years. The kind of physician whose presence in a room changes the quality of the air in it. He looked at the table. At the stable patient. At the dry chest cavity. At Voss, who was standing to the side with the expression of a man who has been asked a question he cannot answer. Croft moved to the table. He adjusted his loops. He looked at the suture line. He was quiet for a long time. "Jordan," he said. His voice was careful. The voice of someone choosing their first word very deliberately. "Did you do this?" Voss looked at the door. He looked at Croft. The battle between ego and honesty was visible and brief. "No," he said. "Then who finished that impossible surgery?" Voss pointed at the OR doors. "The scrub nurse," he said. "Claire. The agency hire." Croft looked at the door. He looked back at the suture line. His face changed. Not dramatically. In the way that faces change when a memory arrives that was not expected, specific and physical and carrying information that changes the meaning of what is currently in front of you. He had seen this repair before. Not this repair. This methodology. This specific mechanical signature, the knot pattern, the spacing, the one-handed technique that required a level of tactile precision that standard surgical training did not produce. He had seen it once. 12 years ago. In a field hospital in Kandahar. "Mitchell," Croft said. His voice had dropped to a register that made everyone in the room pay attention. "Don't let anyone touch this patient. No visitors. No transfers. No one enters this room without my direct authorization." He was already moving toward the door. "And nobody leaves this building until I say so." He pushed through the OR doors and moved toward the locker room at a pace that was not quite running but was not walking either. The locker assigned to Claire Mercer was open. Her scrubs were folded on the bench with the precision of someone who folds things the same way every time because the habit was built somewhere that required it. Her ID badge rested on top. Croft stood in the doorway for a moment. He reached into his coat and pulled out a phone. Not his regular phone. The other one, the one that lived in the inside pocket and had a number he had not dialed in 9 years. The line connected on the second ring. Harrison. The voice on the other end was the voice of someone who does not sleep deeply. "It's 4 in the morning. I know what time it is, Bradley." Croft turned away from the empty locker. "I need to ask you something and I need you to tell me the truth." A pause. The kind that means the person on the other end is deciding how much they already know about what's coming. "Ask," General Bradley Lawson said. "Major Evelyn Cross," Croft said. "Tell me she's still dead." The silence that followed was the longest silence Croft had experienced in 9 years of not making that call. "Why are you asking me that, Harrison?" Because I'm standing in front of an empty locker, Croft said, and I just looked at an aortic repair that no one in the world can perform except her. 3 floors below, in the parking structure's grey quiet, the woman the hospital knew as Claire Mercer was throwing a bag into the trunk of a car she had owned for 4 months under a name she had been wearing for 2 years. She had known, the moment she stepped to that table, what she was doing. Not the surgery. The surgery was automatic, the body remembering what the mind had spent 2 years trying to forget. She knew what she was doing to herself. To the life she had constructed. To the careful, sufficient invisibility she had maintained by taking overnight shifts and never speaking more than necessary and folding her scrubs the same way every time. She had built something sustainable. Quiet. Small in the ways that kept her safe. And she had walked away from it the moment a man's heart started losing the argument with a posterior aortic tear. She slammed the trunk. She stood in the dim light of the parking structure and breathed. She had not chosen this work, either version of it, because it was safe. She had chosen it because there was a version of herself that could not watch a person die on a table when she had the means to prevent it. That version had survived everything that had been done to bury it. 2 years of overnight shifts. A new name. A deliberately unremarkable file. It had survived all of that, and it had surfaced tonight at 2:47 in the morning when a senior surgeon stepped away from a table and a man had 30 seconds of cerebral perfusion remaining. She reached for the car door. Her scanner crackled. Code blue. ICU. Bed 7. She stopped. Bed 7 was Harford. A properly executed pericardial patch repair does not fail spontaneously within an hour. The physics of it don't allow for that. Which meant whatever was happening in Bed 7 was not mechanical. Her mind moved through it the way it moved through everything, fast, without sentiment, following the logic to where it led. The accident. A stolen vehicle. No skid marks on the pavement. 2 in the morning. Harford wasn't a random trauma. She opened the trunk. She unzipped the bag. She took out the weapon she had carried for 2 years without needing and checked the chamber with the automatic efficiency of someone for whom this check was as natural as breathing. She closed the trunk. She ran. The ICU was chaos of the specific kind that happens when a patient who should be stable suddenly isn't. Everyone moving, nobody certain, the machinery of emergency response deployed against a problem that the machinery was not designed to address. The man in the janitorial uniform was already walking toward the stairwell exit when Evelyn came through the fire door. She had 3 seconds to assess him. The empty syringe. The specific angle of his exit. The unhurried quality of his movement, the walk of someone who has completed a task rather than someone responding to a crisis. She took him down in the stairwell with the efficiency of someone who learned these things in places that did not appear in any professional biography. She left him on the landing and ran for Bed 7. Get away from him. She came through the ICU doors without slowing. Voss was at the bedside. 2 nurses were frozen. Security had been called and had not yet arrived. Step back, all of you, step back right now. She read the 4-line in 2 seconds. The residue. The timeline. The specific presentation of a heart locked in chemically induced arrest. Potassium overdose, she said. He's in chemical cardiac arrest. Compressions will not restart this rhythm. I need calcium gluconate 2 amps and sodium bicarbonate. Now. Rip that 4 out and start a fresh line. The nurses moved. Not because of her rank. Because of her voice, the specific frequency of someone who has already processed the crisis and arrived at the solution and is now simply transmitting the steps. Voss started to object. She moved him with the same efficient redirection she had used in the OR. He landed against a supply cart. He did not get up. 2 minutes later, calcium in, bicarbonate following, paddles positioned with careful attention to the surgical incision, she cardioverted William Harford back into sinus rhythm. The monitor beeped. Once. Twice. Settled. The room exhaled. Evelyn stepped back from the bed. She looked at the monitor until she was certain the rhythm was stable. She gave the nurses the post-resuscitation protocol in the same quiet, exact tone she used for everything. Then she turned to leave. Croft was in the doorway. He looked at the stabilized patient. At Voss on the floor. At the nurses, who were looking at Evelyn with the specific expression of people who have updated their understanding of something fundamental. He reached into his coat pocket. He held out a set of keys. "My car is in the physician's lot," he said quietly. "South Side. Registered to a shell company. Full tank. 5,000 in the glove box." Evelyn looked at the keys. She looked at Croft. "There's a man unconscious in the third-floor stairwell," she said. "I'll handle it." Croft kept his voice below the threshold of the nurse's hearing. "I'll tell them he attacked the ICU. That you stopped him and fled in panic." He paused. "It won't be entirely untrue." Evelyn took the keys. She looked at him for a moment with the particular attention of someone deciding how much of the truth to allow into their expression. "Why?" she said. Croft looked at the suture line visible through the oar window across the hall. The repair she had made. The life she had refused to let go when a man with more credentials and less courage had stepped away from the table. "Because the oath doesn't have an expiration date," he said. "And neither does yours, Major." Evelyn Cross, who had been Claire Mercer for 2 years and Abigail and Sarah before that and had been Evelyn for 4 years before any of them, nodded once. She walked past him into the hallway. By the time the first patrol car turned into the parking structure with its lights crossing the wet asphalt, the physician's lot was empty. The Ghost of Kandahar was gone. She left behind a patched aorta, a disgraced surgeon sitting on an ICU floor, and a suture line that the chief of surgery would describe in private, to people he trusted completely as the finest piece of work he had seen in 22 years of medicine. And in the break rooms of Mercy General, in the careful, lowered voices of people who had been in or through the ICU on the night of the storm, the question lived on. "Who finished that impossible surgery?" the chief surgeon asked. "Just the scrub nurse," they said. And the room went quiet every time. Because some people move through the world doing the thing that needs doing, and then they leave before anyone can ask who they are. And the ones left behind carry the question not because they expect an answer, but because the asking of it is the closest they can get to honoring something they witnessed and could not fully name. The quietest people in any room are often the ones who have already survived the loudest storms. And sometimes on a rainy Tuesday at 2 in the morning, when a monitor flatlines and a surgeon steps back and a room full of trained professionals runs out of answers, one of them steps forward. Not for recognition. Not for the record. For the man on the table. That's what Code Whisperers is about. The stories hiding in plain sight. The ones nobody looked at closely enough. The ones who carry the most are almost never the ones you'd expect. If that story stayed with you, you're not alone in that. A like takes 1 second and tells me to keep making these. And if you know someone who has been doing extraordinary things in quiet, send this to them. No explanation needed. They'll understand. Tell me in the comments, have you ever witnessed someone step up when everyone else stepped back? Someone who did the impossible and then walked away like it was nothing? When you're ready, the next Code Whisperer story is already waiting. It begins in a courtroom nobody wanted to enter, a case every attorney had refused, and a janitor in the back row who showed up every single day without anyone thinking to ask why. I think you'll want to be there for it.